Like this situation that we're facing right now is not the be all end all. And yet so often it's like, it feels so big to us because we then all the parenting fears start to
if I don't get it right in this moment, then my son's going to end up in jail.
Or just like, look at how my son is acting. Like he is going to end up in jail, and it's this confirmation bias of like, see how disobedient he is and see how he can't control himself.
Or forget the child. What about you and how you're looked at by the store
exactly.
owner?
I don't know.
You know what I mean? It's like, if you're not confident in who you are,
she's offering him brownies.
Oh, that's
she
funny.
offered him. What else?
She's your mom not taking care of you?
No, literally.
I won't lose hope in the night when the fire's glowing dim. I'll just let go and I'll try. Help me walk this road and find my way back home. Find my way back home. Find my way home.
Welcome back to the Famous at Home podcast. Today we're talking about finding your way home to your kids. You go.
I was just going to say, they were all in here.
They were all in here. And we were dealing with one that was a little bit
we have a
overtired.
Yeah. So this is just real life. Like, this isn't like, there's times when you don't want to find your way home to your kids and you kind of want to just keep driving elsewhere.
But the kids need you to find your way home to them in order for them to be on their way.
But just to like real talk, like we were just we had friends in town. We took them into our little local town in our little coffee shop. We're going around the little stores, and Micah, our 4-year-old, has a full-on meltdown in the store because he's not getting the toy that he wants. He's asking for a toy. And I was like, well, you know, Christmas is coming. Let's add that to your Christmas list. And that line, which I use a lot, did not work this time and had a full-on meltdown. And the shop owner's like trying to help me, like calm him down. And we get in the car, and it was just this, I actually kept fairly calm because I knew me getting angry with him, where I would have really gone to anger in other seasons. But I don't even know if I had the energy for it, truly. And we got him in the car, and I said, Bud, that was really bad behavior. Like that's not who you are. And then he says, you just said I'm a bad boy. And I was like, nope. Let's be very clear. I did not say you're a bad boy. I said that was really bad behavior. That's not who you are. And it was weird how it calmed him so much. This like separation of realizing that's not who he is. And then by the time we got home, we apologized. Mom, I'm sorry for how I acted. And it was good until the next meltdown. And we've had guests, and he's very overtired. And
multiple today.
We can have all the excuses. Like, we both know why he's acting like this. And yet it's really hard. Like, these are the times it's really hard to lean into your kids. It's really hard to want to connect with their heart, to have the energy to do it again when I just want to. It's easier to discipline or actually keep him away from me. Like, I need you to go to your room. I need you to like take the iPad, watch a show. And real talk, like that's sometimes what we have to resort to. And it's not wrong. It's not bad.
Well, I think the issue is that, and this is, we're just diving right into that.
I know.
It's great. We dive right in. Is that, and this is what we really start. This is the crux of where Famous at Home ever even started from, is the heart to reach kids. And, you know, looking back at what was, you know, for us in those early years, we have for those of you who are new to the podcast, we have a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and there's an age gap there for a reason. The first two were really, really difficult. It's like God humbled us in the very thing he called us to, so we wouldn't pull our britches up too high and act like we had it all together. And I remember those early survival years, just looking at the research going, Lord, what really will matter? Not that parenting is going to be any easier,
right,
but could it be simpler? Could we filter this? Because you can't even leave the hospital before you have to make a decision about whether or not you're going to immunize your child. And we all know what the vaccination debate is like today. I'm probably going to get censored on YouTube for even saying that word. It's insane. And then you get them home and you have to make a decision about whether you're going to breastfeed or bottle feed or co-sleep or co-sleep. Do we spank or do we not spank? Do we do time ins or do we do timeouts? Because, you know, timeouts now are not as good as time ins, apparently, by parenting experts. And you're just going, you don't have to be a parent for more than 5 seconds to realize it's the most guilt-ridden, shaming role on the planet. And especially when you hit those toddler years then, and you're in absolute overwhelm, we do one of two things as parents. There are two ways that we parent. We either are the authoritarian, where it's like, I'm the parent, I say so, you do as I say. And or the flip side is, you know what, you're going to do it anyway, just go. And the reality is those two options are sometimes important, and there are times you want to use those. But if those are your primary go-to options, you never develop relationally your child's brain for emotional safety in relationships, because there has to be that middle way. And that's what we ended up finding, and that ultimately what ended up in the book that I published in 2015 called Safe House, How Emotional Safety is the Key to Raising Kids Who Live, Love, and Lead Well, is this whole idea that emotional safety is linked to every major outcome that we desire in our children, because it has a calming effect on their brain when they are in emotional overwhelm, just like our little 4-year-old has been. And so if Christi is in the past, and I go here too, where it's like we go in anger and we go down hard on him, or if we're like, you know what, just go do whatever you want. You're going to do it anyway. And if that's all we're ever doing, he's going to become an entitled. He's either going to become entitled, or he's going to get shut down so much that ultimately he will scream somewhere else at some point. And because he's never had a voice. And the reality is there is a middle way there. And that middle way of emotional safety is what we really are all about and want to talk about today, because that's the way of finding our way home to our kids.
And I think that's the pendulum swing, right? We're hearing the two extremes that, depending on like how you grew up, how you were raised, we so often swing to the other side of the pendulum because it feels different. It feels like freer than, or like fresh water to the thing that we're used to. And like, I hated that. So I'm going to this other extreme. And there is this beautiful middle. There's this beautiful middle that's really hard to walk. And it is hard to care about the heart of my son in the middle of a store where it was like genuinely embarrassing. Like, this is real talk. Like, today was like not a good day. And I want you to hear that story, because we're in the 12 and 10-year-old, they are fabulous and I love them, but we walk through this season with them too. And I think there is a difference when you've already walked through previous seasons to realize this situation is temporal. Like, this situation that we're facing right now is not the be all end all. And yet so often it's like, it feels so big to us because we then, all the parenting fears start to
if I don't get it right in this moment, then my son's going to end up in jail.
Or just like, look at how my son is acting. Like he is going to end up in jail, and it's this confirmation bias of like, see how disobedient he is and see how he can't control himself.
Or forget the child. What about you and how you're looked at by the store owner? You know what I mean? It's like, if you're not confident in who you are, like,
she's offering him brownies.
Oh, that's
she
funny.
Offered him, what else? She's
is your mom not taking care of you?
No, literally. Because I was like, she's like, how does he need water? And I was like, I'm sorry, he's hungry and he's tired. And she's an older woman and she was so sweet, but she's like, I have brownies, I have pizza pockets.
That's so funny.
I'm like, we're good. We're like 7 minutes from home.
This child's not getting a brownie for acting this way. I'll tell you that right now. I need to get him home. Right?
But it was in other seasons. Oh my goodness. I remember with Landon, our firstborn, who's 12 now, he had a meltdown at the library once over having to leave the library. I will never forget that one, because I responded in that way, in that season, not in that season. It was more in that season, but I mean, like, in that instance, the worst I have ever, like, those parenting memories, you're all thinking of them right now, where you genuinely still carry shame over them. Like, I can't believe I did that. I feel, and to just put a coating of grace over all of us, like, we all have those.
And that was the same season of life that Mike is in right now.
Yep. Sure was.
Yeah. That's what I mean. There are seasons in a lot of cases. Now there's outliers, but there's seasons that our kids go through that this is why community is so important.
Yeah.
It's why in this first season of finding your way back home, we start with finding your way home to the Father, finding your way home to your true self, finding your way home to your spouse. And we talk so much about community and needing community, because otherwise you feel alone and you feel like your child is the only one going through this. And the reality is that's not true. We're all experiencing these things as parents, and we need each other. And we need
examples of other parents who've gotten it right. We need examples of other parents who've gotten it wrong, to realize, like, you're in the middle of it too. And will be both. I remember when Candace's season, we did Candace Cameron Bure's podcast season on
7.
Season 7, on
Becoming
parenting.
Emotionally
But I'm like remembering like all our conversations. Like we had a couple episodes where mostly we were talking about stories of parenting, and the feedback from those episodes where it's just Candace is telling stories, we're telling stories of just how we messed up, and memories of like, oh my gosh, in the details of, and then sometimes when we got it right. But the feedback from parents was like, I feel so seen. I feel like, oh my goodness, it was just so good to hear that. And sometimes you're like, really? Just me telling that story? But it's genuinely, I mean, this is why group therapy is a thing, because you hear another person's story and what you respond with is, oh my word, me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Like, I'm not crazy. I'm not alone. In fact, most of us have more in common than we realize, and the comfort that is to our souls. Like, that's not a light thing. That's a deep.
And I think that to bounce off of that point
thing.
is that's what our kids need from us. Yeah. So the way the brain grows, and I read about the safe house. We also talk about it in our book, Famous at Home, which we'll put those in the show notes today. But I mean, this is it's the same dynamic. Their amygdala, their limbic system is going off because they're in fight or flight. And so what that means is for them is they need a calming effect in order to think straight. And when for example, when our 4-year-old is losing his ever-loving mind, if we lose our ever-loving mind on him at the same time, everybody in the house goes up. And we as the parent need to be the ones that are bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind. Like, we need to be the stronger and wiser and kind ones to bring and de-escalate that whole blow up, that whole, the overwhelm in that moment. And if we're not able to do that, then what we're doing is we're ratcheting it up too. And this is a great example. It's a clear example because there's so many times where our 4-year-old who's still struggling. He's learning how to communicate. He's learning how to communicate what things mean. He's literally asking, what does tomorrow mean? Like, just even trying to understand, like, what does today, tomorrow, the next day, Wednesday, like, when's this day? But what he does is when he hears that was bad behavior, he's receiving that as, I'm a bad person.
Right.
And if he's not able to communicate that, which in seasons past, he was unable to communicate that. Mm-hmm. And so if we're saying what you did was wrong, that was bad behavior, what he's doing is he's making that synonymous with who he is. Right. And all of a sudden he's stamping an identity. And now he's scared that his mom and dad see him in this light, which makes him lose his mind even more, which makes us lose our mind even more, which reinforces to him that he's a bad kid. And if we don't have the ability as adults, and this is why we waited to hear episode 7 in the entire season, the very last one, to nail this down. If we don't have the ability to show up and understand this, we will keep reinforcing beliefs in our children that we don't even realize that we're doing. And I mean, it's kind of,
and it's our stuff. That's on us. Like
100%. And that's why this is where I was going with this is we've found, like, in all of the research, we have found that you can sum up all of parenting research into one primary conclusion, and that's that our kids become who we are. And we have talked about this in the past where we have done parenting episodes called Why Parenting is the Wrong Term. Because we don't like the word parenting because the word becoming is a more clear indicator of how our kids turn out than the word parenting. And so it's about who we're becoming. And so, I'll give you this and then toss it to you, and you may have heard, if you're a longtime listener on the podcast, you might have heard me state this research study, but this guy out of Harvard University who wanted to find the top 10 parenting strategies to get the outcomes we most desire in our kids. And so he did a meta-analysis, which is where you take all kinds of data, you sum them all up into one conclusion, and then what he did, and you take the average of all of them, and then you look at, okay, this one are the strongest. And then you go into, he asked parenting experts, what do you think is the top 10? And none of the parenting experts got it right, by the way. The number one parenting strategy to get the outcomes we most desire in our kids was love and affection. Number 2, and you might understand this based upon what we're talking about now, is a parent's ability to manage his or her own stress. Second greatest parenting strategy to get the outcomes we desire in our kids. Number 3 was how you treat your spouse or how you treat a co-parent in a divorce situation. out of the top 3, I would argue that none of them have to do with a direct relationship with our children. They have everything to do with who we're becoming as adults. Even love and affection, we love why? 1 John 4, because he first loved us. When you go to a therapist, what's the first question they're asking you? What was your relationship like with mom and dad? In other words, how well were you loved? And so our love banks that we have are reflective of how well we can show up into our child's world and be a calming agent. And again, I think Philippians 4, Paul, it's like he was he understood the brain. He says, be anxious for what? Nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication. So he's saying, label your emotions, talk to God about them with thanksgiving. By the way, research shows that gratitude and anxiety cannot coexist in the brain. So gratitude will push that out. So be anxious for nothing, but by prayer and supplication, verbalize your words, what you're feeling to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will keep your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. It's not until that point that Paul writes, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is pure, anything true, excellent, praiseworthy, what? He says, think on these things. I think Paul understood that when we're anxious and overwhelmed, we can't think straight. And the same thing neurobiologically happens in our children's brains, that when they're anxious and overwhelmed, they can't think straight. They can't problem solve. They don't have emotion regulation. They don't have cognitive flexibility. They don't have social skills. They certainly don't have self-control. And so what's the model for them to be able to get that? In a finite way, it is us, the parent, being able to enter into their world to be a peace that helps calm their brain in these overwhelmed moments to get them to think straight. And that's what Christi was doing with Micah the other morning, or the other day, or today, actually. It was today.
It was this day.
It was this
very
day,
same day.
where she's going, wait a minute, bud. Like, yes, that was bad behavior, but that's not who you are, right? Mm-hmm. And so, and again, you can't lecture your children. I mean, depending on the age that they're at, I mean, and when they're in that emotional overwhelm, they're not listening to words coming in and out. They have to calm down first in order to experience and receive that information. And so this is why emotional safety is so powerful, is because you actually are wiring your children's brain for relationships in their emotional overwhelm. And that's what makes this so fascinating.
And I think what you're realizing, like, it's preserving the connection between you and the child. And I know there's all these like terms throwing out there right now. There's like gentle parenting, and I know that's all the rage. And it's like not a knock on like any style of parenting. The point is like what you know about. I have
knocks on styles of parenting, but
okay. But my point is, at the base of it, what is, I guess I'm saying, like, what is the end goal that you're after? Because if you want to form disciples, if we are forming disciples of Jesus, we have to be discipled.
Yeah.
We have to be the ones that are shaped first. Otherwise, we're shaping them to look like us, which is what that's what Josh is saying. It's they become who we are. Yeah. So they're becoming smaller versions of us. And yet, I think so often we focus on what we know or don't know about parenting, or like, did I handle that right? What am I supposed to do? And so like what I'm throwing out gentle parenting, because it feels like everyone's trying to like catch on to like what you're supposed to say, how you're supposed to do this, how you're supposed to approach a situation. And all I hear is fear of like, I don't have what it takes. I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I don't know how to approach this because I guess I wasn't doing it right before. And what I want to say is, if you know Jesus, you have the Holy Spirit inside of you. You have access to all discernment, and you have a specific strategy for discipling and that child, because it's different for every child. And you have the great counselor within you who is telling you, as we're listening, as we're learning to hear him more clearly every day, how to respond to that child in that moment for that situation. And it's not this like, I see especially young parents, and I was there, like, please hear, there's no judgment in that. Literally, I lived that, where I was looking at everyone else to try to figure out how I was supposed to parent, because I felt so insecure, so fearful. And those early years with our first two were awful, because I was looking to everyone else to find out how to do this. And because the innate belief was, I don't have what it takes. I'm not doing it right. And I had so much self-doubt, as opposed to carrying the confidence that I have the wisdom of the living God in me, and that I may get this wrong. And that's okay, because there is this thing called repair, which the research calls it repair, but the Bible calls it forgiveness. And tell them the research on that, because when we get it wrong, because we will, what is the hope for all of us?
Yeah. Do you remember those days you're talking about that? You remember those days where you were so you doubted yourself and you were so overwhelmed and in survival, and then you would throw the research back at me and act and you would throw darts at me being like, well, basically like I was in the research and I was studying all this and I'm just going, we just need to do this. And you were so in the moment and feeling the moment. And I'm just going, think of the long run, think of the long run. And you get so in the moment.
Oh, and I wasn't thinking.
And you were like, but this is, I'm saying this is real because
it was so real. I was so fear-based.
And I'm not even, this isn't even about you. This is for all of us. Like marital satisfaction. I just want to encourage you, if you have young kids at home, especially in those infancy years, marital satisfaction dips the lowest when you're in those survival years. And especially in the culture, the anxious culture that we live in today, you know, this is the experience. We get so caught up in the here and now and we forget to play the long game. Yeah. I mean, I want you to think as a child of God, you yourself as a child of God, God discipling you. Mm-hmm. How are you? Do you listen the very first time that God has said for you to do something? And then you've course corrected and you just did it immediately. And that's, you know, he says, oh, by the way, I want you to fast from your phone for 3 months. And you're like, oh, I've been feeling that, but I still haven't done it. Right? And it's like, oh, well, wait a minute. If you get this, like, even we as his children don't obey him immediately. And yet he has so much patience. And yet here we are expecting our children to obey us the first time. And if they don't, then, you know, we're coming down hard or whatever. And we act like our world is falling apart. This is a sanctification journey for us and our children. And so you got to play the long game. If you're not playing the long game, it is so easy to get anxious and overwhelmed and feel exhausted and that sort of thing. Now, if you're 1 to 2 years into this, I mean, you're 1 or 2 years in and seeing the same patterns and the same things, and you got to start asking yourselves the question of, is this a season of life, or is this more because of the rhythms and the patterns and the ways that I'm parenting and the way that I'm leading? And to Christi's point, the research, John Gottman, who's like a preeminent marital researcher, he also studied emotion coaching kids. And one of the things he found with emotion coaching is even if you get it right just 2 out of 5 times, you'll still get the outcomes you desire in your kids. Now, that's a beautiful statistic because you only have to get it right 40% of the time. But the problem is that the other 3 out of 5 times, the other 60% of the time, what's the buffer? The buffer is what Christi said. It's a word called repair, and the research calls it the ultimate of relationships. The Bible calls it forgiveness. What that means is that when we wrong our kids, when we yell, when we say things we regret, because we will, again, this comes back to our becoming. Who are we becoming? Are we entering into our child's world and going, I am so sorry for the way I spoke to you. I am so sorry that I promised you something and didn't follow through. I didn't let my yes be yes or my no be no. I said no and then I gave in, right? I'm not parenting you. I made a mistake as a parent and I should not have done that. I just did it the other day as we were driving down the road in the truck with my own kids where I was like, you know what? I didn't lead you guys well here and I own that and I am sorry. How can I make that right to you guys? Because when we do that, what we do is we, number one, show that we're not perfect. Number two, we help our kids understand that we don't expect them to be, but we also model for them how to make it right when they're not. And I think that's the key as it relates to leading in emotional safety is our ability to humble ourselves in the way that we parent so that we're on this journey with our kids because we're children of God on the same journey, learning how to obey him and treat people well.
And you hear like the grace of that. Like that just feels so much lighter to me because I think when I came in with such a heavy hand because I felt the heavy hand on me. Like I felt the judgment. I felt I'm not getting this right. I felt that I need to do better.
And you felt that from where? Like those were voices. And the whole point of me asking this is because this has to go back to finding our way back home to the Heavenly Father, finding his love, finding our way back home to our true self. And somewhere in that journey, you heard a voice, whether it was from somebody else, outsiders, or whether it was within, or maybe it was the accuser himself, the enemy. You heard a voice that said, you're not a good mom, or you're not a good mom if.
It's not.
And you came into agreement with us somewhere, right? So I guess I'm just curious.
It's that like you're not good enough. Like and that, I think that has been the theme for me, where there's this continual need to do better, like but I wanted to say, I was going to say more, but it's not more, it's better. Like, do it better. And like, that's a slave master. That's not God.
I think that is, yeah. And
I think even as a little girl, if that message was like, if that's the message, whether or not that was the message intended, but that's the message I received, was you could do better, or you could be better, then through that lens,
you're carrying that into every area of your life.
Yeah. And you put that in your, then you put that lens on God. And so he's expecting me to do better. And if you see it through that filter or that lens, you can read the word of God through that lens. You can pray through that lens. You can like understand his character through that lens. And it's not the right lens. And I think that's where I hear, that's been the journey for me, is freeing me to, I remember a counselor telling me once, she said, Christi, it's time to start coloring outside the lines. And I was like, I have no idea what that means. Like, I have no box for that. And then I was laughing at the fact that I should use that term. I have no box for that, because I was still trying to fit everything into this proper, and that's partially control, I'm sure. But also the freeing thing has been to realize that as I give myself grace, so as I go back to the Father and actually get reparented of who I am, what he asks of me, how he sees me, it changes everything. So something inside of me gets set free, like a bird out of a cage, that realizes I don't have to prove anything. I don't have to live up to some standard or continually better myself to get approval. In fact, I'm literally freed of that. And therefore, when I look at my own children, I don't have to see them through that lens too. But it has become the filter by which I know if I'm moving in unhealth. So if I start asking or nitpicking the kids, like, oh, like, I need you to, fix that, change that, schoolwork, what they're wearing, how they've tidied up, like how the house, their jobs, their chores, their things, that if I start nitpicking at them and I can see it in their faces, especially the older ones, and they'll look at me like, okay, Mom. And that when I see that, that has been my course correction of like, I'm feeling that pressure right now and I'm putting it on them. And that's not fair to them, but also I'm in the wrong. Like, that's on me. And so I've had to learn to say to the kids, I am so sorry. That is not yours to own. I am feeling, it's usually pressure. I'm feeling pressured in some way. And it's my way of putting like the valve off the pressure gasket. And it's like putting it on somebody else. Like, I need you to do this. It's again, trying to find, I think, order in a chaotic world. But that for me that's just very honestly been my journey, and realizing how my stuff gets put on my children, but also how my healing can get put on my children.
That's right.
Because now they're part of that. And they're like my son said the other day, he's like, Mom, I always know Landon says, Mom, you doing okay? You doing okay? And that's my cue to be like, clearly I am not, because you are picking up on it. So I guess not. I don't always know what I need, but thanks, bud, for seeing me. Like, you're not responsible for me, but I thank you for seeing me.
Well, and to your healing component of that, I think through the years, I've taken life too seriously. I have, in years past, came into fear, and that's no longer part of my journey anymore, no longer part of my story, because of my own living out of becoming. And it's funny because as I study research and I look at the Word of God and I walk with the Spirit of God, I feel like the Spirit of God has narrowed me down to two clear filters through which I enter into my children's world, and that I parent and I father them. Number one is, are they safe enough? Do they feel safe enough? So in other words, that requires me to be emotionally safe for my kids. Do my kids feel safe enough to come to me when they feel like they've sinned, when in their sin? Do they feel comfortable enough bringing me their sin and their wrongdoing and allowing me to walk through that with them? And then number two, are my kids joyful? are they experiencing joy? I feel like if I can filter my parenting through those two things, and I'm doing those two things really well, again, I try to simplify everything, because if you study all the parenting research and you study all this book and that book, it's like Christi said, you're going to get overwhelmed. There's a lot of overwhelming information on parenting. And at the end of the day, our kids become who we are. And what I was seeing was I was taking life too seriously and I was living in fear. And I went, whoa, I've got to flip that right there. I've got to live in joy and I've got to have fun and I've got to be safe so that my kids can bring their stuff to me and feel like they can talk to me and have important conversations. And so I end with that for that very reason, to go, how can we simplify parenting? And again, if you want more information on this stuff, Famous at Home book is a great place to get this. Safe House, How Emotional Safety is the Key to Raising Kids Who Live, Love, and Lead Well. Those two books I would highly recommend. I would start with even Famous at Home. Safe House has all the research data in it. Famous at Home is going to be a little bit more just practical for your everyday family, and also include marriage in that. But the reason I say that is because at the end of the day, how well I'm emotionally safe and how much joy, guess what those two parenting strategies are all about? Me, the parent. They're all about who I'm becoming as an adult. And so at the end of the day, they don't have anything to do with a direct relationship with my child, but they do have to do with how I'm showing up with them. And that's all on me. And so now, granted, let me say this too. One last thought. I talked a lot about parenting strategies. At the end of the day, yes, our kids become who we are, but our kids were given free will. And I know families whose kids walk with Jesus. And John writes, I have no greater joy than to know that my children are walking in truth. But I also believe the opposite is also true. I have no greater sorrow than to know that my children are not. And I just want to encourage you, if your child is not, there is a proverb that says, raise your children the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. How old they will be, I don't know. But this is why prayer, I genuinely believe, is the single greatest parenting strategy on the planet to get the outcomes we desire in our kids, is being on our knees for our kids. Because without that, then it's all on us. And the reality is, it's not all on us. I would say it's mostly on our ability to be on our knees, and then also forming our own character formation. So with that said, that's our core understanding. Of course, we will continue to talk more specifically about some of these topics, but as it relates to finding your way back home to your kids, it really is, these are the core issues. Just like we talked last week on marriage, these are the core, fundamental, foundational things on finding your way back home to your kids. And the way that we are doing this with Famous at Home, Tender and Fierce is now launched, so you can register now. It's in the show notes. So the first cohort, there's 3 cohorts for 2025. The first cohort starts January 8th. You can register now. Early pricing is through December 13. The field experience, you can go to the website. That's also in the show notes. That will also launch in January. You can go there and register as well for the field experience. So check that out. That will be in the show notes as well. That is the discipleship journey and coaching journey that I am doing with a cohort of men, because we all need community in being able to lead well our families. And we've talked about this so much that you just can't do it alone. You need community. You need a group of other people to bounce these things off of, to share ideas with, to share vulnerabilities with, to confess to, and to just walk alongside each other. And so that's our opportunity to be able to help you in your becoming and leading you way back home to your kids. This is a wrap on season 1, our first official season with the new rebrand, episode 7.
Hey, babe. Good job.
We did it.
Season 1. Check.
Season 1, check.
I like it. It feels good to me.
We can't wait to see you for season 2.
Yeah. So until then, until next week, we pray your heart and your children's hearts are awakened, and that your family sees revival.
May you find your way home.